All right, everyone. Good afternoon from Austin, Texas. My name is Jarrett Way, and I'm the marketing manager here at Mighty Citizen. And we're here today for the Building Your 2021 Communications Plan webinar. I want to thank you all for registering and attending today. And just before we get started here, I want to go over just a few quick housekeeping items. So the first thing is that this webinar today will go for about 45 to 50 minutes. So we'll actually have time at the end for questions. So during the webinar, use the question and answer feature. I'm just going to submit a question in the questions box. I'll be monitoring those throughout the webinar and compiling them for Rachel and Nicole at the end. The second thing is that we're going to be sending these slides and a link to the recording of this webinar to you here in the next day or two. So don't feel pressured to take a bunch of notes at this time. Just look out for in your inboxes the next 24 or 48 hours and we'll get that to you. At this time, I'd like to introduce you all to Rachel Clemens, our Chief Marketing Officer, and Nicole Araujo, our Client Engagement Director here at Mighty Citizen, who will be leading our webinar today.
Thanks, Jarrett. Hello, everybody. So for those of you who don't know, Mighty Citizen is based in Austin, Texas, but I happen to be up in the burbs of Chicago right now getting help with virtual school from my in-laws. So we're kind of scattered. Nicole's joining us from DC and Jarrett's in Austin today. And I see you guys are from all over the place, which is super fun and exciting, including some international locations. So it's always nice to see. Let's take a deep breath, y'all. Let's take a breath. It is 2020. It is November. Serenity now has been my phrase for 2020. I'm sure a lot of you feel the same way. So we're going to talk about building our communications plan for 2021, which might seem pretty daunting considering how 2020 went. But we'll talk about why a plan is necessary and a few other things today to get us prepped for 2021 and really get us feeling good going into the new year instead of maybe exhausted. So I'm Rachel Clemens. For those of you that don't know me, I'm the CMO here at Mighty Citizen. I have 20 years of communications experience. My strength is in storytelling and I love content creation, things like that. My weakness, which was very hard to choose, is actually queso. It was queso or ice cream or brisket or always food related, but I went with queso. And now I'm going to turn it over to Nicole.
Yes, so I am Nicole Araujo. As Rachel mentioned, I am located in the DC metro area. I actually live in Maryland, but I think anyone in this area kind of understands that that's just an all-encompassing space here. I'm the Client Engagement Director here. I have been working with associations for over 20 years, and I, like Rachel, I'm not going to actually give you the full amount on that because it tends to make me feel a little bit older. So we're not going to do that today. My strength is communication. I absolutely love people. I love face-to-face communication. It is where I excel. And 2020 is a killer on me because I am missing that terribly. So when Rachel was asking me what my weakness is, I have to say that it's a double-edged sword. Communications is my strength. It's also my weakness. Succinct has never been a word ever used to describe me. Some may say that I can make a short story long. So if through this presentation, you notice Rachel kind of nudging me along, you'll understand why, but it does make me who I am.
That's right, Nicole. We wouldn't have you any other way. And I forgot to mention, for those of you that may not be familiar with Mighty Citizen, we are a branding, digital, and marketing agency for mission-driven organizations. So that's primarily nonprofits, associations, higher ed, and government. And so we help our clients basically increase their revenue and boost their awareness in order to better their communities. So we're going to talk today about comms plans, but certainly we work in all kinds of communication spaces.
Mm-hmm. We face a lot of challenges in creating and distributing communications for mission-driven organizations. You know, 2020 is the perfect example of how we face current events. 2020 gave us a pandemic and an increased focus on social justice and an election that continues to create chaos in how we communicate. We've had to shift priorities. We've had to change the work styles that we live in. I mean, a lot of us are now working from home. We've closed offices. We've had to let go of staff, or in some cases, increase staff. The pandemic is a perfect example of all of this. a lot of times we also face really hard governance challenges. You know, I have yet to meet a mission-driven organization that has a really easy governance process. Sometimes there's too many cooks in the kitchen, or you just can't get things approved. We have to prove ourselves time and time again. And then there's this overload of information. Personally, I'm overloaded with information. We wake up every morning to an email box of hundreds of emails. We also are sending those emails as well. So are we overloading our audiences? And there's so many different ways that we can communicate. We communicate through direct mail. Our website is the main hub of how people learn about us. We use social media. We want our attendees to come to our meetings. We use magazines. And if that wasn't enough, we give them surveys. We ask for them to do researches. We send out press releases. We have videos and podcasts and emails and newsletters. And as if this wasn't enough, it's exhausting. This isn't even a complete list.
Yeah, it's a lot of noise right now. And we want to talk about how we can use our communications to cut through that noise and really make a plan for how to do that in 2021. So what we're going to talk about today is understanding how to own the communications plan. So that means who owns it, what that looks like, and what ownership actually means for the long haul. We're also going to talk about what should be included in your 2021 communications plan. So we're going to walk through each step of the plan and talk about what to put in there so that you're showing what you're going to do next year and also the value of what you're going to do next year. We'll talk about how to manage the plan on an ongoing basis so it stays relevant to both you and your marketing team, but also to your leadership team. And then we also are going to share a communications plan template with you at mightycitizen.com/comms plan. You can go grab that now if you want to. It is not necessary, but if you want to see, the pieces of the plan as we're moving through them, feel free to do that. Some of you may have downloaded that already because we did share it in a previous email. So maybe that you already have it. It is the same plan, if so. So I want to start, how about, let me ask you in the chat. So how many of you do not have a written communications plan for 2020? And if you don't have one, why not? And while you're doing that, I'll tell you a little bit about what we see when we come in and work with clients. So a lot of them do not have a written communications plan, and the reasons are very varied. One is that we're a small organization. I'm a team of one, and as one person, I already know what's happening. I don't need to write down a plan. Sometimes things change so fast. If I created a plan, it would be obsolete, in like a week. I can never keep up with an actual plan. Another is I don't have time. And so, I don't ever create one. I'm seeing from you guys, small staff. Wow, these are coming in so fast, it's hard to keep up. You're working on one now. That's great news. So this should be really helpful for that. Let's see. A lot of people don't. Limited capacity, no full-time communications person, and you need staff buy-in. So we're going to talk about how to get staff buy-in today. We have, but we never follow it past a couple months. So we'll be talking about that today too. So these are also things we see. So for all of these excuses, today we're going to say, no. You get a plan and you get a plan. Everyone's getting a plan today. I'm playing the part of Oprah. Nicole and I are playing the part of Oprah, and we're all getting plans. So let's talk about why they are must-haves. This may be preaching to the choir a bit, but maybe there'll be some new things here about, the value of them. One, they force you to focus on strategy versus tactics. So you want to think of strategy as what you're going to do, and the tactics is how you're going to do it. So strategy is kind of like, what are you going to accomplish? And so you want to focus on strategy, because if you only focused on tactics and tasks and activities without connecting it to strategy, you're going to waste time and energy pursuing tactics that aren't necessarily returning organizational value. And that you're going to hear this over and over again. The important thing about a communications plan is showing value of communications. So we'll talk more about that. So it also helps you to set goals. Of course, if you don't know what you're trying to do, you won't know if you've gotten there. It will help you show the value of communication. So you're going to share this plan with higher ups in your organization, and the plan shows how your communications help reach your organizational goals. Within many of our organizations, we have strategic plans. We know what we're trying to do as a full organization for 2021. And so you want to show how communications is helping to reach those overarching goals for your association or your nonprofit or your university, wherever you work, communications is helping your organization to reach those overarching goals. And it's really important because that shows the value. It's easier to invest in communications when we see how it affects the overarching organization. Plans help you explain why you're doing what you're doing. So you're going to share these. We're going to give you a method for sharing these with the higher ups and getting their buy-in so that you can more easily say no. We know what happens. We create a plan. 6 months later, somebody comes to us and says, hey, we have this new idea. We want to do X, Y, and Z. When you have a plan, it's easier to say, okay, that sounds great. Do you remember 6 months ago when we all agreed to this plan? I understand things change and they shift and we need to be flexible. What are we not going to do in this plan to make space for this new idea? Because typically, unless you're getting new resources, new ideas are very taxing. And so you want to make sure that you're able to have those conversations with people who have bought into the communications plan.
And Rachel uses this one on me an awful lot. So in our dynamic, I am a little bit more tactical and she is very much more strategic. She forces me to think with that strategic mind, but she uses this no factor quite a lot. She does say yes a lot too, but it really does help to say, okay, wait a minute here. Here are our goals. Is what you're asking me to do right now really relevant to that?
Exactly. Nicole and I make a good team because she likes tactics and I like strategy. So she'll come with a great idea and I'll say, why are we doing that? So that's pretty common. They help you build a budget. We're going to take a look at budgets in a minute, but if you don't know what you're trying to accomplish, how do you know what to budget for? And then lastly, they keep the team moving in sync. So plans are really great when you do have a team for making sure that you're all moving in the same direction. So I use these ladies in business suits because I just thought this was fun. You might have been expecting a picture of NSYNC, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. All right. So let's talk about ownership of the plan. Typically, the plan is led by the senior most communications staffer on your team. So if you get a team of multiple people, it is your senior most person who's going to lead this. Sometimes you're a comms team of one. And so guess what? You're the de facto leader of your comms plan. And so while they lead this and often draft it, they're going to be the ones to do that initial drafting. So kind of getting the plan together. Having said that, you want to solicit ideas from the rest of your team as well. We have found, I've been doing this for 20 something years. Jarrett has been doing this for less years. And so Jarrett can be a little bit more plugged in certain places than I am. And so I really value getting his opinion on our marketing plan as well. So make sure you're sharing it and getting ideas from other team members too. We keep a running log of ideas. So this is actually also really helpful for working with Nicole, who's more on the relationship side of things and the sales side. And so when she has an idea, we send her and anyone else who has ideas to our marketing ideas spreadsheet, and they can put in their idea, and then we have columns labeled yes, maybe, and no. And so roughly about once a quarter, we come and we review the ideas and we say, do we need to surface any of these up? Do they kind of fit in with goals we already had? Do we need to give anything attention for any given reason? And so you'll see that the idea is listed, and then there's initials in there. So the J, the N, and the R are Jarrett, Nicole, and Rachel. And we're weighing in on these ideas and kind of basically trying to score them or give them emphasis. And so some things are a quick no. You'll see the no's on this one is the geofencing, digital targeting. We did not have an in-person conference this year, so we were not going to do that. So some things are easy and some things take a little time and negotiation.
And I absolutely love this document because I have morning coffees with the association community. I am at events, and whenever I hear an idea or something that they're struggling with that I know our team can create a quick article or can, it can be a topic for our next webinar or something like that. I love that I have a place I can just throw it in here and it gets evaluated. And sometimes Rachel and the team can then shift around priorities on content depending on what's best to serve our industry. So it does kind of keep us on the front.
Yeah, and that may be a good spot to add that we build our communications plan, for a year, but our content is built quarterly. So we're not building out, we kind of have an idea of important content moments throughout the year, but our content is more flexible. We have more flexibility with that than we might have with like our overarching goals, right? Okay, so once you've kind of got, that draft going, you're going to share it with your full communications team for feedback. We talked a little bit about that. Then you're going to share it with what I labeled here your bosses, but it kind of depends on your position, who these people are. It could be leadership. It could be your, executive director, your CEO. It could be committees. If you have communications or marketing committees on your board, it could be your board members. So you want to share it up the chain a little bit so that they know how communications is going to help them reach their overarching goals. And we'll take a little closer look at this a little bit later. So just keep in mind, this audience can be slightly different, but make sure that you are sharing it with them and that they see buy-in. We'll talk a little bit more, again, a little bit later about what specifically this looks like.
All right, so what goes into a communications plan? Well, John Graham has said that if you've seen one association, you've seen one association. And that's certainly true in the association space. I also feel it is extremely relevant in the nonprofit, higher ed, and government space. You all are very unique organizations. And while you have similar challenges in the realm of communications, you also have very unique nuances. And it's important that you understand your best practices, but more importantly, to understand your audiences and understand their needs and your industry needs. In order just to create a communications plan that's really going to be effective and speak to them. So it's a little bit of both, but we're going to help you do just that. So as you know, Rachel and I are part of Mighty Citizen, and we can't share our clients' strategic plans with you. So we were kicking around ideas on how to make this kind of more of an interactive, or how to showcase examples as part of our session. So we created the fictitious International Association of Mighty Citizens. And yes, you have to do the power pose.
Got to do the power pose.
So, it's really just to give you an example that you can relate to as we go through this communications plan template. Also, it was just fun. And the fact is, we work with mission-driven organizations, and we know that there's a ton of Mighty Citizens on this call. So we're really happy to be here with you. So for all of our campaigns that we go through a checklist. And I'm thankful for Rachel, because this kind of stuff makes me think more strategically. But all of our campaigns have to have an organizational summary, a market analysis, the audience clearly defined, and goals. And Rachel's going to take you through that organizational summary.
Yeah, so now we're in the meat and the potatoes of our comms plan. For those of you that may have downloaded the comms plan template, you're going to see that this is the order that template moves in. And the first section of that is an organizational summary. So the first piece in your organizational summary is an executive summary of the comms plan. What that is a short and succinct view of the plan for any executives that are reading it. So your comms plan can end up being 15 pages. When you share that with the higher ups, they don't want to read 15 pages. They don't have time for that. They really don't need to know the tactics and the activities and the other things that are in the plan. What they do want to know is overarchingly, what are you going to do? So it often will include key milestones. So if you've got an anniversary coming up, you might mention that, what you're going to do around that. It will definitely mention your goals. We'll take a look at this, a little example of this a bit later. You will write this last. If you were to write your executive summary first, you would kind of sit there and spin your wheels for a while. So I'm going to recommend, you'll see it's listed first in the comms plan, but you're actually going to skip that, do all the other pieces, come back, and that's going to be so much easier to write once you've been embedded in the comms plan drafting. You're also going to include your vision statement. So what will the world look like when your work is done? And also your mission statement. What are you doing every day to accomplish your vision? Most of you likely have your vision and mission statements already. They're kind of key to our organizations. You do not need to rewrite those here unless they need a revisit, but just feel free to, this is an easy part, feel free to copy and paste those right into your comms plan. And the reason they're here is just to remind us, this is what we're doing. This is why it matters every single day. I also want you to list create a list of your products and services. So what do you offer to your audiences, and what are those things called? This is really important for getting everyone in your organization, as best you can, calling things the same thing. So I'll give you an example of this. So again, we're using our International Association of Mighty Citizens as our reference point. So because we're an association, our product and service list might look like this. We'd have membership, we'd have certifications, education, events, and meetings, we'd have advocacy, and we'd have a foundation. And so you can see that I list the product service, and then I also list the deliverables that go hand in hand with that. So it's a quick snapshot of your products and services and what they're called. For example, some organizations might want to call advocacy legislative efforts. If that's what you call it, totally fine. Just make sure you list it as legislative efforts, and that's what it's called on your website and in your marketing materials. One goal of the product and services is to list everything and to make sure they're still the same things. You know, you're going to continue to have one of your services or your products, but also so that people are calling them the same thing. Next up is listing your communications personnel. So in our fictitious association, we have a team of 5. We do not have a team of 5 now, but when you're being fictitious, why not give yourself a bigger team, right? This is our chance. So in our team, we have communications and development under the same umbrella. And so you see we have a VP of communications that oversees everything, and their responsibilities are strategic leadership and overseeing the budget and the plan and PR. We also have directors of marketing and a director of development that sit underneath that person. And then we have marketing managers and digital marketing managers. So this is really an accountability chart. It's saying here's who's on our team and here's what they're ultimately responsible for. If you're planning to hire in 2021, first of all, good for you. Second of all, you might list here, upcoming digital marketing manager and what they will do and how that will be different from who you currently have on your team. Let's talk budget. So it's 2020, and unfortunately we know that a lot of us have really seen our budget stall. So according to Marketing Week, 90% of marketing budgets are delayed or in review. So a lot of us have been in review for a while. It's not just, it's not that they've cut our budget maybe, but they've stalled our budget. Some of us have definitely seen cuts. The same industry leader also says 44% of marketers are reducing budget in the second half of 2020. Of course, we're almost at the end of 2020. Probably a lot of you have seen this. For other organizations, you know, where you're cutting back budget, you may also be seeing some additional engagement depending on what's happening. So some associations are seeing an uptick in members because they're providing real value and content to their industry right now. Some nonprofits might be seeing an increase in donors because of who you serve and how that ties into what's happening in current events. But for most of us, we're seeing our budgets get cut. Smart organizations and those that are able, so not just smart, but also able, are actually increasing their marketing spend right now because their competitors, and we all have competitors of some form or another, are scaling back. So for some of us, our competitors or our peers in some ways are scaling back their efforts right now because they've been hit a little hard in 2020. And that, if that's happening and you're able, that's a good time to push your marketing and communications a little bit more because you can gain brand share or brand awareness during that time when there's a little less noise from competitors. So I'm going to share with you guys a quote from Peter Drucker. If you're not familiar with him, he's a pioneer from the 20th century in business leading. Anyway, I just highly recommend you look him up. But he has this quote that says, "The business enterprise has 2 and only 2 functions." So I'm wondering if you can imagine what they are: marketing and innovation. He says, marketing and innovation produce results. All the rest are cost. Marketing is the distinguishing, unique function of the business. Sorry, I'm looking around my microphone here. This is probably preaching to the choir a little bit when we talk about the need for budgeting for marketing and communications, but this is really important. A lot of leadership wants to look at marketing or comms as a cost. It is not a cost. If it is done correctly, it is an investment in additional revenue and growth. So you've got to really, if your mindset is it costs money, no, it's an investment. Just like you would invest in a stock and watch it rise, that's what should be happening inside your organization as well. So this is the mindset we're going into when we talk about the value of communications and investing.
All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about market analysis. We cannot stress enough the importance of knowing and understanding your audiences. Has your team done any market research? Does it need to be done? Do you really have a clear picture of what your industry is going to be facing in the next 2 years, 5 years, and 10 years? Obviously 2020, none of us could have faced that. So there's always little obstacles that pop up, but having this base knowledge of what your industry is doing is so relevant. And you can find that in several different ways. Obviously, audience surveys, stakeholder interviews, focus groups. You can turn to organizations. In the association space, we have ASAE. In the fundraising space, we have the Association of Fundraising Professionals. They do lots of studies and surveys, and they have blogs and resources that we can turn to. There's industry partners. There's also for-profit research companies that also often have lots of loaded information on what our marketplace looks like. You know, what is your market position? Where do you sit? Where are you especially compelling? Consumer Brands calls this market share. But how are you actually measuring that? Are you doing that? Are you measuring yourself against organizations locally, nationally, or regionally? Are you looking at statistics like your organization size, your budget, your number of members, your Google search rankings? How are you determining it? There's so many different ways to compare yourself and to measure it. You have to do what's best for your organization and then stick to that. You know, what is your unique value proposition? What do you do better than anyone else, and how are you showcasing that? And then what about your competition? What do you know? What are they doing well? What are their weaknesses? How can you position yourself against what they're doing really well? When we look at competitors, it's really not necessarily another agency or another association. It's really anyone or anything that's pulling the attention away from your audiences. So in our fictitious example, in the International Association of Mighty Citizens, that could be another agency or industry partner that is providing educational resources. Perhaps it's even like the American Marketing Association. That could be something there. But understanding your competition and all of these different aspects really allows you to position yourself and fill in the gaps and really give insight and direction as to why your audience should choose you, choose your resources, attend your meetings, and continue to engage with your organization. Marcom teams have a really tough job. I mean, I am amazed at the amount of audiences that our mission-driven partners have to actually focus on. We have nonprofits have donors, but they don't just have individual donors. They have major gift donors. They have corporations. They have their funders and their clients and their volunteers and community leaders. And associations have the same struggle with their membership, past members, current members, associate members, industry partners, chapters, legislators, volunteers, community leaders. Universities have students and parents and alumni and donors and faculty and staff. And every one of these organizations has to communicate to the general public as to who they are and why they exist. But how does a Marcom team actually decide who takes priority? You obviously can't speak to everyone in the same language, and you have to really target that. But how do you decide who gets the most attention and what channels you're going to do that in?
Sorry, Nicole.
And it's going to change. I'm going to actually, can you go back, Rachel? I just want to mention one more thing here. You know, the fact is that year to year, you're going to create this plan and you're going to have different goals. And like last year, we might have been really focused on our legislative buy-in. We really needed, there were some tough bills. We needed to get some buy-in on Capitol Hill. That might have been our focus. So our audience may shift. This year, we've seen such an uptick in membership that we really want to focus on those new members and getting them engaged and keeping them here. So don't think that just because you set this plan for this year that your audience and the primary audiences that you're going to target are going to stay the same every single year. You really have to evaluate it. So I want to talk a little bit about personas. Personas are concrete representations of your actual audiences. They include demographic information like age, how long they've been in the industry, the role that they play. And it includes psychographic information. So why are they engaging with your organization? What are their pain points? What motivates them? And the reason to actually have them is to really determine and understand what your audiences are challenged with and what they're choosing to turn to you to fix. Like why are they engaging with you in these different scenarios? And personas are built based on the information that you collected in that market research, the surveys, the stakeholder interviews, and the focus groups. You know, when you have a persona, you can really create and target a communications plan that is going to speak to your audiences. It's going to be in the places where they are finding their media and in the language that is speaking to them. So it's really important. It helps us in understanding how we create our content, when we release it, where we release it. I want to caution you though, because you've seen I wish we could pull up the other slide on all the audiences. You've seen the vast amount of audiences that you're serving. Like, look at this. You can't possibly create a persona for every single one of these different audiences and break it down into the different levels of donors and members and not create a ton of stress for your team. So really be careful how you slice and dice your audiences. Make sure that you're going to create personas and campaigns and communications that are going to be beneficial to your organization and create an ROI that works for you. You don't have to be the end all be all to everyone and speak to every audience individually. It's just too taxing to create that copy and to create those different targeted channels.
Yeah, I would add, Nicole, that you can slice and dice any number of ways and have personas for all those if you've got a great, huge team. Most of the people we work with do not have that capacity. So I always think, oh, I wish I had a persona for that. And I think, oh, I'd have to do something with it. I'd have to like really put into action. That's going to create more, you just have to prioritize.
You do. And I also think that personas are really, really deep. Like they dig in really deep and they take time to put together. And I've seen organizations that put them together and then don't use them. So make sure that whatever you do create, you dedicate the time to, that you actually use them. So I want to talk a little bit about the two samples that are on the screen. So for our example purposes at the International Association of Mighty Citizens, we have Annette. Annette is a persona of a new member. She's just recently joined. She's attended one of our webinars. She's just dipping her toe in the water of what's important to the organization. We're going to use the information that we create about Annette to use to create communications for new prospective members. Stephen is the dream member. He is highly engaged. He's been associated with us for years and years and years. He sat on our board. Every single one of his staff members are certified in our products. He's great. We're going to use his information to create communications for our current members that we just need to increase engagement with and keep that retention level up.
All right.
All right. So now you have your audiences. You've defined the long list of audiences. You've chosen the, let's say, 5 personas that you're going to target this year. You're going to put those together. Well, now what we want you to do is actually create a list of your key current members, donors, or customers. Those members that you want to target to increase engagement, to grow them, to get them more involved with your organization and less likely to drop off. We're also going to have you list out all of your target prospective members, donors, and customers. Again, these are, you know who these people are. These are the people that you run into all the time and say, why the heck are they not a member? Why haven't they donated to our cause? They've attended 3 meetings, but they're just not joining. How are we going to engage them? But we actually want you to list those companies down, those individuals down. And then we're going to look at channels. We're going to find out, where are they engaging with you on, is it social media? Is it through emails? Is it your newsletter? Is it at your events and your education that you're putting out there? And you're going to decide on how you're going to target them and create that communications plan. And your personas are going to help to direct you in that way.
All right, let's talk about goals. So I want you to think about your top 3 communications goals. Now, these are big. I always use the phrase big, hairy goals. My husband was like, nobody knows what that is, but I call them big, hairy goals. They're kind of in your face. They're really strategic and broad. And I'll give you an example of this in a moment. They're also outside of things that you do like you just kind of have to do to keep the wheels turning. So you know, they're in addition to like all the content creation you need to make. So we want to limit it to 3 because we don't want to overcommit and overwhelm our teams. I'm going to give you an example of what 3 goals look like in a minute, and they're big and hairy. And then all the things we have to do related to those goals fall under them. So it can get really big really fast. So you want to make sure that you are mindful of how big your team is. You're going to list these goals in priority order. Inevitably, something can change, as we have all learned this year. And so sometimes what happens is you've got to dump a goal or dump something that you previously had. When they are listed in priority order, it's easier to decide with everyone which goal we're going to dump. So if I've already gotten my strategic or my leadership bought into my plan, it's easier to say we all agreed this was the least or the less priority item. And so therefore we're going to dump that. Again, they should be broad and strategic. They should also ladder up to your organizational goals. Hopefully by now you have an idea of what your organization will be trying to do in 2021, whether that's increased revenue or engagement of some sort, whatever that looks like. Typically your comms plans can ladder up to those, and they should, because that way you're showing here's how comms is going to help support the organization as a whole. When comms supports the organization as a whole, it's much easier to get buy-in and budget for it. So that's really important. Oh, I felt like there was something else I was going to say. Oh, some of these will be dictated by your board. Some of your goals, some of them they'll say, we need you to do X, Y, and Z this year. And then some of them you'll have some freedom with. And also sometimes the things that marketing or communications needs to do are outside of the organization's goals. So usually if I have 3 goals, I'll say 2 of those have got to ladder up. 1 of those is for marketing only. Oh, one thing else I want to say about goals. A lot of times people will say, why don't you put goals first in the comms plan? Like that seems like the most important thing. Why wouldn't you list those first? And as I start to walk you through this, the idea is that you have given so much thought to your organization, your structure, you've given a lot of thought to your market and where you sit in the marketplace, and you've given a whole lot of thought to your audiences. Your goals start to become pretty clear about what is needed as you move through those exercises. So this is why they're listed last. It's like we've given so much thought to kind of like our current scenario. By the time we get to goals, it's pretty clear what our goals need to be. Here's a quick look at the goals section of the executive summary. So the executive summary is about a page or maybe 2, no more than 2 pages, that tells, you know, your leadership team, here's what we're doing in 2021 from a high level. You also want to list your goals in that executive summary. So this one says, we'll know we've been successful if we reach these goals, and you're going to see measurable metrics of success in the goals section. We'll talk about that in a moment. But for our fictitious International Association of Mighty Citizens, we have established that our 3 goals for 2021 are to retain our member growth from 2020. Nicole spoke to this. You know, our fictional association has seen our membership rise because we've been creating really great content and resources for our industries. We want to increase our engagement through the usage of our products and services. We listed those earlier. We want to send more people to our events. We want to get them certified. So we're going to do that as well. And then we're also going to increase our brand awareness. Our association is fairly new, so we need to get people aware of our organization. So those are, you see why I say 3 goals now, because those are big, hairy goals. They're really robust and they ladder up to our organizational goal. An example of that for, I'll give you an example. Let's say one of the strategic goals for the International Association of Mighty Citizens in 2021 was to increase our revenue by 5%. Let's say that's an overarching strategic organization goal. You see how these things ladder up to that. We need to retain that membership growth we already had in order to maintain the revenue we had. We need to increase engagement through products and services that we sell. And then by increasing our brand awareness more, we're likely to get more members in the door. So you see how that kind of ladders up. Okay, for each goal in your communications plan, you're going to have activities listed under that goal that say, these are the activities we will undertake in order to reach our goal. I'm going to give you a great example of this in a moment, but right now just think, okay, goals lead to activities. So here are the things we have to do to reach that goal. Each of those activities has a metric. How will we know, how will we measure whether our activities are successful? And again, I'll show you this in a minute. And then we're also going to have tactics. What tactics need to happen in order to complete these activities? Your tactics eventually become your task, all the things you have to do throughout the year. So here's an example of this. Again, using our International Association of Mighty Citizens, our #1 goal is to retain our member growth from 2020. Again, these are in priority order, so that really is our #1 goal. The first activity we're going to take in order to retain our members is to improve our onboarding experience. We've identified that we see people drop off, kind of early, maybe their engagement drops after they become members. So we want to improve our onboarding experience. We will measure that by saying we want 80% renewal in year 1. I like stretch metrics. So
Achiever.
I'm an overachiever. Yeah, maybe. I'm a bit ambitious. So I always set a metric for my activities. I like stretch metrics because sometimes typically your metrics need to be based on some experience or some research or some analysis. Meaning, when we look at our metric, we know typically our renewal rate is 75%. So I want to get that up to 80%. I'm basing that on our past renewal rate. Sometimes what happens is you have an activity where you don't really know what the metric should be. Like you haven't done it before, it's a new initiative, you don't really know. This is a good opportunity to find out what other people are doing. So I often will recommend that you can Google and see if there are benchmark studies. There's lots of benchmark studies for nonprofits and associations, higher ed. So go see what other people are seeing from a benchmarking perspective. Ask other people in your industry. So for example, I have a roundtable where several of us in the communication space get together and we talk about what's happening in our businesses. That is really valuable to me. That's a great focus group to say, hey, what is everybody else seeing? Nicole does a coffee talk every morning with the association space, and she can ask them, what are you guys seeing for this? So really look at ways that you can ask other people or get some data to set your metrics, because if you don't have those metrics based on something factual, it's really hard to get your people, your decision makers, to invest in them. Okay, stretch metrics. I like stretch metrics, especially for goals where I'm basing it on someone else's data. So I'm basing it on benchmarks. I'm not basing it on something we've done before. So they are things where if I'm not quite sure exactly what my metric should be, I will set a metric and then I'll set a stretch metric to say, if that one was maybe too low because I wasn't really sure, I'm going to stretch myself to a 90% renewal rate, which is pretty dang high. Okay, and then tactics. Your tactics are basically, what do you need to do in order to improve the onboarding experience? What are some steps you can take in order to do that? So for us, we identified we need a welcome kit, both digitally and printed, that has clear directions on how to register online and access members only content, their Mighty Citizen badge, and a benefit reminder document. So what do they need out of the gate? They need this welcome kit. We haven't been doing this previously. We're going to add this in 2021. We're also going to do monthly social post emails and postcards showcasing a single benefit. Most of you have so many things that your organization does. It can be really hard to keep track. And if it's hard for you to keep track, it's even harder for your members, your donors, your clients to keep track of as well. So we're going to make it really easy and just do one benefit per month. We're also going to do a welcome call from our local Mighty Citizen chapter, and a social media shout out from national. So again, getting them engaged and seeing some benefit and some value right away. We're also going to review new member activity stats and identify trends and contact points for inactive members. So how can you, use your data to basically increase your membership and your onboarding experience? So that's a look at how we do tactics. Here's an example of activity 2. So you might have probably will have multiple activities that ladder up to your big goal. So our activity 2 is we want to increase new member annual meeting attendance. We know if we can get our new members engaged in our annual meeting, we're more likely to see them come back again and again. So our metric here is to have 25% of our new members attend. Perhaps we had 15% last year. Certainly virtual events could change this as well. Our stretch metric is 40% of new attendance for members. And then we would list tactics here as well. Our first one being, we're going to offer special pricing for new members. And you will go on and on like this for each of your goals and each of your activities.
All right. And I just want to quote from the previous slide. You notice there's a ton of tactics underneath that strategy. So they do have hand in hand, and there is a real important reason to keep those goals really succinct and keep them to 3 and limited.
Nicole, I want to add one thing here, because so literally this morning, our sales and marketing teams got together and we started to kind of what I would call blue sky or brainstorm what we could do in 2021. So we start with a lot of things, and it's a mix. We know what our goals are. So we have a ton of activities listed of things we could do. And I see from the chat that a lot of you are one-person organizations or one-person departments. It is really important so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take that long list, and it's me and Jarrett on the marketing side of this. And I'm going to take this and I'm going to say, what out of all of these things we could do, how do we prioritize them? And then from there, what can we actually get done? Because we will not be able to get done every idea that we have. We will not be able to get done everything listed in our sheet. It's really important that you come back at it later and prioritize what you could actually do. One thing I'm going to do this year, I'm asking for a new team member in 2021. It's a hard sell. Things are uncertain, right? But I'm going to go for it. And one way I'm going to do this is I'm going to turn to our CEO and I'm going to say, hey, you remember that list of all the things we wanted to do? Here's what I can do with status quo. Here's what Jarrett and I can get done in 2021. If we add a team member, here's the additional things I can get done in 2021. And then I'm going to have the nerve to ask for some interns on top of that. And I'm going to say, if we have Jarrett and I and a additional person and 2 interns, here's what else I can add to that list. Now, he's probably not going to go full hog and give me everything, but you know what? My additional hire looks better as a more viable option because it's now the middle option and not the more expensive option. So I know you guys are stressing with like all the things that have to get done, the fact that you just can't do it all. And that's why the plan is so important, because it actually shows what you can get done. And if they need you to get more done, then you got to have that conversation. What are we going to cut or who are we going to add? Right. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Sorry. And Rachel's team certainly has my backing because half the things in that plan are things I need her to do as well. So I'm all for more staff if we can make it happen.
Exactly.
So I'm going to talk a little bit let's talk about how to manage this plan. So you want to check the status at least monthly. This is not an exercise of let's build it and forget it. You are most certainly going to check the status monthly to keep everyone in check on moving in the right direction. You're going to actually update it on a quarterly basis. So you're actually going to go in and make changes. As you look at these things and you look at the monthly review and the quarterly review, you're going to shift. I mean, the reality is you're going to have to make changes and you're going to have to make things on the fly. Hopefully not to the extent that it was in 2020. I'm going to show you in the next example how we update it here at Mighty Citizen. It's really important for us. We use Google Docs a lot here. We're very collaborative in how we operate between teams. But I'm taking you back to that example that Rachel had shown about our goal of retaining member growth from 2020. So we're going to fast forward. Let's say it's September 30th, 2021. We've looked at all of the stats. We've hit that first metric. We're at 85% of new members have renewed. Our plan is working. Now we're stretching and continuing our reach for that next step. But the question is, what if it is a year like 2020? What if we need to change everything? All of a sudden, we can't attend. I mean, last year, 2020 for Mighty Citizen, we were supposed to be in person, attending, exhibiting, speaking at events across the US. And unfortunately, that changed. And we had to all go virtual, just like many of you did. And we had to change how we did things. And instead of us revising our 2020 plan, we started fresh. We said, okay, look, it's a whole new world right now. We have to look at this with completely fresh eyes. We don't throw away that plan, but we have to start fresh from it. And obviously, or else I think it would have been a mess of changes along the way because there were so many shifts in 2020. It's really important, though, that you share any of these shifts and changes with your teams. You have to keep everyone moving in the same direction. When we say that we want you to share with executives, and that could be your board. It could be a committee, especially if they are giving you funds in any way, shape, or form. You want to give them quarterly results. You want to share it with the full staff a few times per year. And this is really essential because, we want buy-in from the whole team. And the way that you can get buy-in from the whole team is to communicate the value of the communications team. So you want to do that a few times a year. Anytime we get new staff, if it's a new executive staff member or communication staff member, we are reviewing the full plan with them so that they can see from the start where we are, what our plans are for this year, where we stand and the status of it. And especially if that's a new CFO, we want to make sure that they know what the communications plan and the communications team is doing in order to ladder up to those big strategy goals. Now, we don't want to overcomplicate it. You know, y'all have enough to do for sure. So what we suggest is that you give a bite-sized bit of information periodically to the full staff. You give a snack size to the executives on a quarterly basis. And this snack size should include ROI, numbers and statistics. This group really likes to see the numbers. So make sure in the metrics you're tracking that you can showcase those results. And then for your full communications team, you want to give them a full meal. And this is going to be a continuous update status. They have to know, they're your army on the ground, and they have to know where you stand, where you need to pivot, where you need to change and keep everything going. If you can create this communication cycle and you can implement it, everyone is going to be aware of what's happening with the communications team, with the plan, the success you've had. You're going to showcase your value. And you might even help the organization to work better together. They might understand suddenly why all communications have to go through your communications department, or why you have to follow a branding guideline. It's really important. They might see your value a little bit better.
All right. So to wrap it all up, you need a communications plan. I know it's uncertain. 2021 does not look that much more certain than 2020 did. Hopefully, you know, fingers crossed for everything. And we did get some good news yesterday on a vaccine, but you have to have a written communications plan. It's really hard to know what you're going to do if you don't write it down, and to show value to other people on the team. Don't overcommit on your goals. I am an overachiever. I think I can do everything. And I have learned over the years, I absolutely cannot. And it is way better to overperform than underperform. So I try to be really clear about what my team is capable of getting done in the year. Absolutely get buy-in from your team, not just your team, you know, your communications team, but also from your leadership. That's really important. And again, we're trying to put something in place here so that you can show your value. Set clear metrics. We talked about how to get those metrics, look back at data you've got, benchmarking, talk to other people, but make sure you are, these are the things you're tracking and how you know you're being successful. So make sure you have these. Track metrics and report on it quarterly. So again, you're reporting quarterly to your executive team. I would recommend that you're reporting monthly to your comms team. So we have a monthly report. We use Google Data Studio. It puts it all in there really nicely for us, and I can see everything. And I report monthly to my team, my communications team.
Hey, Rachel, before you move on, I kind of want to add there, you know, we know that there is a vast, our audience is unique. You're small, you're large, you're medium, you have different staff sizes, different budgets, and all of that. When Rachel said you get a plan, I want you to understand you get a plan. These tools are easy to use, and you don't have to have a complicated system that costs your company $100,000 to make this stuff work. You know, Mighty Citizen is using Google Docs, and we use Sheets to track our ideas, and we communicate with each other. Like we really need, you know, don't limit yourself because of some sort of technology lacking. There is basic technologies and skill sets, and we've handed them to you here for you to have a plan. You just have to do the mind work and the creative work to put it into place.
Yeah, and that segues nicely. We're going to go into questions, and Jared's going to help us with that. But first, you can get the slides like right this minute, as well as that annual communications plan template at mightycitizen.com/commsplan. Go grab that. We will have a recording as well that we'll be sharing via email with these items too in the next couple of days. So I'm going to hand it over to Jared for any questions.
Can I add one more thing onto that?
Yeah.
So I know that we're given the comms plan here, and I don't know if we can throw it in the chat here, but I feel like they run hand in hand, especially when we talk about that idea sheet where you're tracking ideas, and you mentioned that content. it changes quarterly. Our editorial calendar is another huge tool that people love to use to really engage and to get their content out there in an organized fashion, and it's easy to use. So that's another template that you would probably find very useful.
That's a good point, Nicole. And actually that editorial content calendar is linked from this URL as well.
Perfect.
I just forgot to mention it. Yep.
All right, let's jump into some questions. We have quite a few, and I'll fill up our time here. First one, I'll just go down the list. How rigidly should you stick to the plan once you have it in place? Or in other words, how do you build in the inevitable need for change?
That depends on how good my argument is, right, Rachel?
Yeah, okay. So I'm a really flexible person. I can bend pretty easily, meaning, well, I don't know. I think I marry both. Nicole could speak to this more, but I always leave a little bit of room. So typically what happens is, I'm going to look at this list that we made this morning. I'm going to say, Jarrett and I can get this, this, and this done. And I'm going to put us at about 85% capacity because I know there's more stuff that's coming. I just don't know what it is. I do the same thing in my budget. I have a miscellaneous item. I'm lucky that my CEO lets me have this. I have a little budget that's, it's not that much. But every month I know I have a miscellaneous budget too, because there are going to be things that pop up that I've just got to get done, or that, yeah, that totally makes sense to add that. If it's something big, that's when I turn around and say, what are we not going to do that we agreed we were going to do? This is what I think we should not do. Let's talk about it as the person that's coming to me.
Nicholas had a really popular question, and it was, any insight on being a one-person team?
Yeah, I saw that question was popular and I tried to answer it previously. I think probably the biggest difficulty with being a one-person team is having time to do everything. And so I think it's really important to make time to plan. That is the biggest struggle, is like, how do I do planning when I've got to get out this email and I'm going to do that? We got this event next week. You just got to put it on your calendar and you've got to block it. This is not something I would always recommend, but one trick I've kind of learned this year is I put PTO on my calendar knowing that I'm really only going to take a half day. And then I use that PTO time for potential other work. So just, you've got to get that on your calendar, block everything else, tell them you're out of the office, even if you're working, like find a way to get that planning done. And then with that, what you're expected to do for the year. And then when something else pops up, you can have that other conversation we talked about.
Rachel, this is a question that I think I've heard you get before. And Carla wanted to know that sometimes you mention marketing plan instead of communications plan. Are they the same thing? Are they different? And if you could explain.
Yeah, I should have tackled that because we do hear that question. In my mind, they're very similar. It's hard to have marketing everything is communications. So in our world and in many of our clients' world, that team is the same team. Unless you're a really big organization, you have a separate marketing department from your comms department, they are typically living in the same space and tasked with the same goals. Same thing with fundraising. I saw somebody say this would be a really good setup for a fundraising plan as well. Exactly. A lot of times those two things are very linked. If you're at a nonprofit, communications is very much tied into fundraising. So I lump them together. I think they're very similar.
And I'll tell you, the questions are flowing in. We have to do a follow-up thing of some sort, but I think we have time for a couple more. Kristen asked, I often struggle with how to measure my goals. For example, we often want to expand our brand awareness, but how do you measure or track this growth?
Oh boy, brand awareness is the hardest thing to measure. So some things I have done, because we in order to do brand awareness properly, you probably have to do a lot of research and surveys, and it just can get really cumbersome, especially if you're small. One of the ways that we have measured that is things like downloads. How many people have downloaded our resources? Attendance at our webinars and our conferences. We have seen these skyrocket. Web traffic. How many people are coming to certain sections of our site, or how much is that increasing? Those are not, I measure those things every month, but I measure them because that's the way I can measure brand awareness. So I'm doing things to change those and to increase them, but that's the way that I think is easiest for most people to measure. What does someone being aware of you look like? How do you know they're aware of you? And then doing that, like doing those things that ladder up to that, that might show that.
Newsletter signups would be in there too, right?
Newsletter signups, that's a really good one.
And I think we can get one more in here. Lindsay said, Rachel, the real life example you gave of blue skying plans for 2021 and then proposing additional resources based on that idea list, does that mean the CEO or your boss was a part of the blue skying, or how would he or she appreciate those ideas?
Okay, so that's a very good question. In our scenario, our CEO is part of the blue sky. That will not always be the case. So I think the thing there is, let's say you have a new idea that has not been done before. You're going to have to do some of that work to figure out what the potential ROI on that is. So again, look at your benchmarking, talk to other people that maybe have done it. What does that look like? The flip side of that is, a lot of times we'll find that organizations are doing things because they have always done them. You've got a gala that really doesn't bring in that much money, but everybody, oh, they love the gala. It brings in, you know, everybody would be so sad if the gala was missing. Well, would they? Because they're not putting money behind it. So like, look at the other things that you're doing too. I think that's the flip side, is like, what are you doing that you don't have to do? We have I should have mentioned this. We have a not going to do list as part of our 2021 planning that says, we did this year, it didn't really work, or it just wasn't worth the time that we put into it. And like for us, we're going to do less content production next year. It's valuable, but we have some other things we want to prioritize instead. So look at what you're not going to do in order to help you make the argument for what could be, what you could do.
Awesome. Nicole, Rachel, thank you so much. Everyone, please remember that we'll be sending out the slides and the recording of this webinar to everyone who registered. And we'll also be including a link to a survey or feedback form for webinar today. And we hope that you'll take just a minute to let us know what you think. If you have any questions about what we talked about today, you can always email us at hello@mightycitizen.com. Thanks everyone for attending. Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks everyone.